am Caroline Sumter, serving as Neuro Project's Policy and Program Director. As if you're just joining us, please drop your information in the chat. Let us know where you are viewing this urgent conversation from. Just a little background about me. I am just excited every day to get up and work with an amazing team at Neuro Project, where we are in these streets, so to speak, doing the work of our neighbors. Tonight's presentation is at the heart of what NRP is all about. We envision a future where all rural citizens use their civic power and engagement to foster and sustain vibrant and successful communities. We are a nonprofit organization that engages young and marginalized residents in our rural communities, making sure to amplify their voices. Listening, advocating, empowering, educating our neighbors, one door knock, one phone call, one program, one email at a time. In our focus counties, Union County, Anson County, Richmond County, Scotland County, Moore County, Hoke County, and Robinson County. When we think about public safety is not just about policing. It's about fostering environments where every person feels protected, supported, and connected. With the growing impact of violence on our schools, neighborhoods, and local economies, the time to come together to address these challenges is right now. Life is so precious, and too often we do not recognize its value until it is taken away from us. In light of the recent events that happened earlier today, I ask that you join me for a moment of silence for those in the North Forsyth High School community. Our prayers here at NRP are with the family, loved ones, students, and the entire school staff and administration that must navigate through this painful ordeal. Thank you. Enough is enough. We've often heard that. We need to get off our cans and do something. And tonight, we wanted to bring awareness on public safety as it affects our rural counties. Many think of public safety, crime, violent crimes only being something that resonates in metropolitan areas, urban areas, but often we don't realize what we actually live and what's around us in our rural communities. As you see on the screen, violent crimes per 100 people in North Carolina has a state average of 312 people being affected. When we look at our rural counties, we see that those numbers, with the exception of 2 counties, are greater than our state average. At this time, I want to turn our urgent conversations portion of this interview to our esteemed leader, Ms. Cynthia Wallace, who will serve as our moderator for this evening. Thank you, Cynthia.
All right. Thank you so much, Caroline, and our team for leading preparation for this timely and important event. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for tonight's urgent conversation. Let's talk about public safety. I'm honored that Caroline asked me to serve as the permanent urgent conversation moderator, though I definitely tried to get out of this. Thank you, Caroline. As you just saw in the previous chart, 5 of New Rural Project's 7 focus counties have violent crime rates higher than the North Carolina average, including all being higher than Mecklenburg County, which is an urban center. As New Rural Project co-founder and executive director, I can say this isn't just data. It's what folks have been telling me and Helen as we co-founded this organization since our very first focus group in August 2021. Tonight is about addressing those serious concerns and examining the unique public safety challenges rural counties face and exploring what's working, what's not, and what we can do together. I'm grateful to our panelists and our guest speaker and to all of you for leaning into this dialogue with honesty and urgency. And I believe Caroline mentioned it earlier, but as you think of questions you might want to ask our panelists, please don't hesitate to drop those into the chat and we'll be curating those as we move forward. All right, we can move to the next slide, Caroline. So I want to briefly highlight the work underway in Anson County through the newly formed Wadesboro Coalition for Peace. I know a lot of Anson County folks in the house. Raise your hand in the air, give a little reaction in the space. Um, but Anson has a historically ranked in the top 5 counties in North Carolina for gun violence rate. They're higher in overall violent crime, but even higher when it comes to gun violence. Based on that, earlier this year, we applied for a grant to work on gun violence in Anson, a rural place, alongside our closest partner, Leon Gatewood and the Hollis Center. Even though we didn't receive that grant, Mr. Gatewood and I were committed to the work. In June, after a series of shootings, Wadesboro Mayor Fred Davis reached out to Mr. Gatewood, and then Leon brought New Rural Project into the mix. Together, we held our first gun violence town hall, which was called the Wadesboro Coalition for Peace, a name that Mr. Leon Gatewood came up with. So if he's on here, wave his hand. I know he's here. And we had almost 100 people in attendance at Smith's Funeral Home that night. Our initial partners included the Caraway Foundation, Black Voters Matter, and Anson Men of Action. Since then, the coalition has met every 2 weeks, either in person or virtually, and we launched working groups that have hosted a faith leaders luncheon, a back to school drive, public school funding and policy event, and 2 major community gatherings, including a September fish fry that also kicked off Black Voters Matters statewide gun violence awareness tour at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Waysboro. At that event, residents shared powerful stories of how gun violence has impacted their families' mental health and physical health. If we move on to our first speaker. So, our coalition ensures the faces and voices of those impacted are always at the forefront of our work, as we thought there was. So, no better way to start tonight's conversation than to hear from a young person like LaJohnny Lee. LaJohnny was raised in Anson County and has become a super volunteer for us in the last few months. Then, at that September 5th community fish fry in the church, he spoke about how gun violence had personally impacted him. Thanks for joining us, LaJohnny. We
Thank
can
you
start.
for having me. I hope
No,
everybody's doing well.
yes, thank you so much. So, LaJohnny, um, your comments when we were having that community discussion as people talked about how gun violence had personally impacted them, what you said really touched me and many folks that were in the room. And so we asked you to spend a few minutes to kind of share as much as you feel comfortable about what happened to your family member and how that loss has affected you.
Okay. I'm gonna try to be brief. Um, it started back in 2015. Where this one guy where wasn't my cousin, but I consider him a cousin. He I he was healed, and I wanted to, for the last time, but unfortunately I was unable to do so because no one told me, when the I guess when the celebration was. And then 22 years later, 2017 was the one of the, I'm not going to say worst, it was one of the hardest moments of my life. In the summer of that year, I ended up losing a cousin that lived in High Point, and he and I were like close. I mean, I loved him to death, and he loved me. And then on top of that, you know, I had a great friend, and during that time, we were going through issues as well. So it was a whole lot that was going on. Um, and then it got to the point where that loss really affected me because I ended up losing weight. I ended up losing over 30 pounds and didn't even know it. And it got to the point where I I wasn't eating like I was supposed to. And and I had to be put on vitamins to make sure that I ate. And so months later, I was, trying to get myself together. And then months later, around this time, I ended up losing another cousin to the same thing. So it was a whole lot that I was dealing with at that time. And again, I was so depressed. I just didn't want to be. I just wanted to be left alone. And my grandma, like, she began to ask me, like, what's wrong? What's wrong? Are you okay? But me, I'm just like, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. But deep down, she knew that I wasn't okay. So I ended up going to therapy, and it really helped me out. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about these three people that I mentioned. And I say all that to say this. I thank God that, because I could have said, you know what, I hate the world, I hate everybody, and this, that, and the third, but I'm glad I did. I was able to, finally pick myself up, and here I am years later. I was able to go back to school and pursue a career. I graduated from RCC earlier this year with an associate's, and now I'm currently going for my bachelor's at Fayetteville State to pursue a career in English literature, paralegal, and pre-law studies. And as I said before, I still have my depressive moments, but I turn those into positives as a way, because my cousins, they're happy, they're smiling down on me for all the accomplishments that I've made, and they wouldn't want me to be depressed. And so I thank God for getting me this far, because had it not been for him, I could have easily went in a whole nother direction that I wouldn't have wanted to be in. So I'm forever grateful. And I'm grateful to, be on this platform, talking about it. It's hard, but I'm just glad that God gave me the strength and courage to come on and talk about it. And hopefully I'm encouraging you all that no matter what's going on in our life, that we could still come back and be greater than we've ever been. So thank you all, and God bless you.
Thank you so much. I've got to take my breath here. It's just as impactful hearing your story, today as it was a few months ago. And we're just really proud of you and proud of all that you've overcome, and the fact that, you're now a student at Fayetteville State. And we are excited that we had a chance to connect with you, and we look forward to you continuing to work with us. And thank you so much. And as we, I said a little bit earlier, thank you so much, LaJohnny. Caroline shared some numbers, but we know that there are people behind numbers. And that's why we didn't want to just start this with a few statistics or even with our esteemed panelists. We wanted folks to really see how this impacts an everyday person. And I'm sure many of you have stories also. And a lot of this work also came from a conversation we had. I think it was our February staff meeting at the Holla Center, Mr. Leon Gatewood's location. And we literally had to pause the meeting because members of the team had recently been impacted by community gun violence or even personal family members that they had lost. And so this is not just statistical. This is not, that it is really personal to us. So thank you, LaJohnny, for trusting us with your story. This is exactly why we're here tonight, to help us think about how policies, systems, and community partnerships can respond to the issues young people and families are living with. We're fortunate to now be joined by a panel of distinguished leaders. They bring diverse perspectives and deep expertise. They'll help explore what it will take to address the real realities we've just heard about so powerfully. So now let's meet our panelists, who will spend about 2 minutes each. I know some of you are elected officials, so try to keep it to 2 minutes. And you're going to tell us a little bit about your background, where you work, and your role or affiliation with public safety. So we're going to start, if we could bring Representative Garland Pierce up to the virtual stage. He represents Scotland and Hoke in District 48. And then we'll bring DA Spencer Merriweather, who is Mecklenburg County District Attorney and helped us in a pinch when, unfortunately, DA Adams' illness took her away from being with us tonight. And then finally, Maryjane Richardson, who is an assistant DA District Attorney in Robeson County. So if you all can, I think you are in the stage on the screen, and then we can take down our presentation and we're going to start the conversation. So as I mentioned, just give us about 2 minutes, starting with Representative Pierce, telling us a little bit about, who you are and where you're located, Representative, and how your work ties to public safety as an elected official.
Good afternoon. Greetings to everyone. Delighted to be on the call tonight. As Mrs. Wallace said, I'm State Representative Garland Pierce, representing Scotland County and Hope County. And in the past, I represented Scotland County, Hope County, and Richmond, 4 counties, and now just 2. But listening to the young man talk was very moving, number one. But I've been in the Laurinburg area for 35 years, and I've been in state legislature. This is my 21st year. And I have always had a desire to do all that I can, and particularly at the church, starting with the church first. We would always have community gatherings for young people and anything to bring them together. Years ago, we started something called the Back to School, Stay in School, where we would bring young people together to give them school supplies, give them a word of encouragement. So some of that started years ago, and I'm glad that it's still going on here in Scotland and Hope County and in Robeson County. Uh, I've learned one thing from we had a professor, president at Fairfield State University named Dr. Hackney, and he always had one thing that still stays with me. Sometimes you have to be a committee of one. Sometimes you might not have a whole group with you, but if one person will advocate in any community, I think that's so important to have people who will advocate on issues, particularly when it comes on Scotland County. After Saturday's parade, we had 3 shootings in Scotland County, a rather parade, and that was very young people, and young people saw that shooting, so it's going to impact their little world going forward. But I am committed. I just had a workshop a week ago on with the folks from Raleigh about uh, juvenile violence. And we had the staff folks to come down to talk about that. We left there with people designed to apply for funds and do whatever they could to make a difference. So I'm committed to doing that. And I could talk on and on, but I know everybody wants to say, but I'm State Representative Garland Pierce from Scotland, Hope County, been in General Assembly 21 years and in Laurinburg for 35 years. So I know the type of violence that you've talked about with those counties. And Scotland County is a leading county, sad in the top 10 with violence. So I hope that we can do more and get from this conversation to be better able to encourage our young people. But I just think that committee of one is very important, and particularly in the rural areas. Let me make this one point. When I came along, there was community PTO where you would just go out to different communities. In the rural areas, people are not really right in town. So you need to go to those rural areas and have those conversations and find out who is the mayor of those communities. Because there's always some lady or some gentleman that has the that can get people to the table and can talk about these very important issues. So I think in the rural areas, we need to just get out from the city limits and get out into the counties. But I'm on the call, but I just think we need to be find more folks who are willing to be a committee of one on this very important issue. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Representative Pierce. And D. Merriweather.
First of all, again, my name is Spencer Merriweather. I have the privilege of being the elected district attorney in Mecklenburg County. Tonight, I have the privilege of being a poor substitute for DA Jamie Adams. But luckily, I was already signed up for this anyway because I knew it would be an interesting conversation. I think that Mr. Leake's comments are already a good jumping point off for me and the work that I do. The job of the district attorney is to, as the Constitution says, to prosecute all general crimes within that district attorney's district. That said, DA is really where the rubber meets the road. All of the complexity, all of the what your police officers and victims and witnesses will see on the scene, it meets the complexity of the law. A lot of times your judges will only hear the admissible evidence that comes in and won't hear the deeper context and the way that an entire community has been impacted by a violent crime. And so it's the job of the DA to be a voice to reflect all of the trauma that can be inflicted on a community and certainly try to do that. And yet we do have constraints by law and resources and in working with our law enforcement and working to make sure that justice is really upheld in a community. That's hard work. I think everyone, I know certainly in my family wonders why it is that someone would sign up to do it, but I think you'd sign up to do it because of exactly what Mr. Leake just illustrated for each of us, that it is hard, but it needs people who are willing to commit to be in that committee of one, as Representative Pierce says. I look forward to the opportunity to kind of talk with you in greater detail about some of the challenges that not only, we face in a community of 1.2 million people in Mecklenburg, but I know that I have in common with my colleagues across the state in rural areas because we're all facing these challenges. And there's going to be a lot more in common that we have as far as solutions are concerned that it may seem. So I look forward to sharing that with you tonight.
All right, thank you. And last but certainly not least, Assistant District Attorney Richardson.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm Maryjane Richardson. I'm an assistant district attorney here in Robson County. I'm actually Robson County born and bred right here in Lumberton, North Carolina. I've been with the district attorney's office here since about 2017. Actually started off in Representative Pierce's area in Hoke and Scotland counties a long time ago. But I prosecute all kinds of cases, everything except sex offense cases. We have a particular DA or two that specialize in that. But everything from traffic tickets to murder. I also work with our treatment courts. We have 2 criminal treatment courts and a family / DSS treatment court that I work with. We have a couple diversion programs, programs for teen and educational programs to kind of give people a different path. I think that's very important when we're talking about violence in communities. One of the things LaJohnny talked about was he had opportunity outside of the circumstances that he was in. And I believe, especially in rural counties where they were originally based in large industries, manufacturing areas, when those businesses move out, you're often left with a lot of people who don't have any opportunity. And so to be able to address some of the safety concerns, we have to provide people something else to do, some other way to support themselves and their families. Otherwise, you get into a desperation that is hard to break. It's a cycle that's hard to break. But again, like our other panelists said, we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Right. Thank you all so much. And Representative Pierce, we'll start with you. As a rural state representative, how do the needs and realities of small towns shape your legislative priorities around crime and public safety? And what policy areas do you see as most urgent to address rising violence in rural areas?
Thank you for the question. I think, as I said, I think I've learned one thing about being in Raleigh. A lot of times people can't get to Raleigh, but there are resources that will benefit rural communities, but sometimes we have to really find them. We have to look for them. They're there. So I just think it's important. As myself, I try to get with those agencies to see just what, after 21 years, I'm well aware of most agencies and what they do, but I think it's so important that we bring them to bear, particularly in our rural communities, because there's a lot of challenges, as Mrs. Richardson talked about. Robinson and Scotland just really has a lot of challenges because Robinson being so big, Scotland a different type county, but poverty is really something that's really highlighted in Scotland County and Robinson County. They're 1 and 2 in those areas. So I think all that I can continue to do is to advocate for the funding to make sure that law enforcement, our sheriffs, and our police departments, and there are funds. But if you don't, here it is. A lot of them are not aware a lot of times of what's available at the state level for our rural areas. So it's so important for people like Representative Pierce and others to dig those funds out, find them, and make sure that our agencies know about them. And not only that, there's a lot of nonprofit groups, ladies and gentlemen, that can benefit from state funding once they're made aware of. A lot of times, I hate to shake my head, they are not aware of the fundings that a lot of major cities know about for different reasons. So I think as a legislator, it's my position to dig, to look, to find what's available and make our citizens aware of those type fundings. And what it's not always funding, it's just other resources that we might not be aware of. Just thinking about the gun violence piece, I go back to one more time. I just think that we just need to starting at the school level, excuse me, starting at schools. I think there are programs in the school system. I know they are to encourage our young people to just stop with the gun, get them out their hands. Number one, and that's a whole nother subject. How they get the guns in their hands in the first place is the issue that we really need to have more conversation about. Don't leave your cars unlocked. There's just so many things that we can do as a community to help with gun violence and guns in the hands of our young people. That's what we're really dealing with. Like I said, Saturday, Sunday after the parade, during the parade, there was 3 shootings in Laurinburg within an hour. So that's unreal. So that's what I'll do as a legislator. Thank you for the question.
No, thank you. And also thank you, Representative Pierce, for pointing out that, you know, gun violence and there's a correlation with economic conditions. And
Yes, ma'am.
those 5 counties that are above the state average in our 7 focus counties,
Mhm.
all are what we call in North Carolina Tier 1 counties.
Yeah, right.
And unfortunately, Tier 1 doesn't mean you're the best. It means they are the most economically distressed with high unemployment rates
Yes,
and
ma'am.
just many concerns. And so we definitely know that you're out there in the fight. Representative Pierce, you've been in a long time, and we're
Yes.
glad that you are still in it for our
And then
community.
and it makes one statement. And there are in our community, just say Scotland, there are just different pockets that some people don't want to see, but they are there. And we've got to get in those communities where we can have a conversation with people who feel like all is lost and there's no future. And there's a lot of communities setting in all of our communities. Everybody on the call tonight know of those type communities. So that's the place we really got to get in. You got to be for real, as you know, Miss Wallace. When you go in there, you can't
Mhm.
go in there. You got to be real. You got to stick with them. You can't go one day and have a meeting and go home. You got to continuously go and have those conversations, particularly with the younger people in those communities. Because they find out that you're not for real, you've lost all hope with them. So I think that's another thing. You got to be committed to this fight.
Thank you so much. And that's definitely the belief of the Wadesboro Coalition
Yes, ma'am.
is staying in community and not, we met the first time and we had almost 100 people. And I was like, oh, well, maybe we'll meet next month. And Mr. Gatewood said, that's too long. So we meet every 2 weeks. And
Yeah.
we've been in community, and that's what definitely part of what it's going to take, but it's a lot deeper than that. So, Dee Merriweather, I think you've already talked about the role and responsibilities of an elected district attorney. What differences, if any, or what similarities do you see in how those responsibilities play out in rural counties versus urban places?
One of the things Representative Pierce talked about that really resonates with me is, um, when you have pockets of desperation within your community, crime's going to follow it. And for all the shiny buildings that I might have in Uptown Charlotte, there are a lot of deep pockets of desperation within my community. And the truth is, the way that we're all linked is crime can get up and down Highway 74. pretty quickly, and it will impact all of us. There's a certain chaos theory to crime. If you've got a 14 and 15-year-old that are breaking into cars in a hotel parking lot in Charlotte and they retrieve 12 weapons, all of a sudden you've got some cheaper firearms that are out on the street that will find their way up to other counties in Highway 74. And they create real issues for people in other communities that don't look particularly like Charlotte. So all of our fates are sort of connected by what's going on in each other's backyard. I try to keep that in mind in the way that we, talk about crime, not only as an individual county, but as an individual region, because we're all impacted by what's going on in one another's backyard. But I will say that certainly in Mecklenburg County, we have a number of different resources, and Representative Pierce is also right that resources isn't just about money. I know that I can get mental health resources and trauma care and all these things within an instant after something extremely bad things happen. And I know that my rural colleagues, it might take a while. They've got to sort of piece that together with other types of institutions within their community, and that can be more challenging. I can say, however, that creativity often fosters a tighter community bond sometimes, so that the entire community understands the way in which they need to respond to real violent crime. Whereas sadly, in some of our, in an urban area like mine, you can have something horrible happen on one side of town, and then the other side of town acts like it didn't happen at all. I don't believe that to be the same type of reality in some of our rural areas, and certainly that kind of response, heart-driven response that I want to make sure that we're replicating in my county as well.
No, thank you so much. And as I go to DA Richardson, what you said is something that I've recognized. I'm from I live in Charlotte, but I am from rural Georgia. No stoplight. I lived off a rural route on the highway. And the thing that I felt also in this last few years working with New Rural Project and being so connected with these rural counties is how personal crime is, which is different than where I live. I watch the news, I see there's a murder every day or every other day, but I don't know them. In a rural community, the folks sitting in on my team that live in any of those counties or the people we interact with, they either are related to the folks who have been, who are deceased, or they are closely connected. They went to church with them, or they see them in the grocery store. And so it is a different reality of how it feels when crime and gun violence happens. So we're going to get this closer back to rural for your DA Richardson, Assistant DA. What do you see, given your experience across three of our focus counties, as the most pressing public safety challenges facing our rural communities? And how do you think how do those realities shape your thinking about prosecution, prevention, and community collaboration?
I think one of the biggest challenges, specifically for law enforcement and the DA's office, is staffing. Um, like we saw in the chart that you presented earlier, Robson County's violent crime rate is astronomically higher. It is not a proportion that is across the state. It's astronomically higher, and because of that, we need more district attorneys, more legal assistants to work with us. But due to staffing and considering the population, the number of people actually living in this county, the number of residents, we're often not given that kind of funding or that kind of manpower, again, because we're a rural county. Why would we need that much? But if you actually look at the numbers, it's very much needed. But that also goes for law enforcement as well. One of the more challenging issues our local law enforcement is having is turnover rates, right? Because a lot of other bigger counties with a bigger population, maybe a more less poor, better socioeconomic status kind of county, they can provide better salaries for law enforcement, right? And better benefits. And so a lot of people will live here in Robeson County because they're born and raised here or have family members here and will go to Fayetteville, will go to sometimes even Bladen County because they have better options there. And so you often will get a case, and by the time it goes to trial, you have to go track down your law enforcement officer somewhere else. And so that provides a break in consistency with how your laws are executed, how people are charged, as well as your community involvement. It's hard to get used to your local law enforcement officer if he's only there for 12 months or less. It's hard to build that community, the bridging the gap between the community and law enforcement when you don't have those people that are staying there, that you're seeing walk up and down the streets, that you're seeing at your PTA meetings and school events, if they're never here, right? And so it's very challenging. Considering we're understaffed and we don't have that consistency, it's hard to have a steady going flow without the resources.
Thank you for that. And one of the things that in Waysboro, where we do our work, we saw, they're a smaller town, about 11,000 people, I believe, and they went from a need of 20 officers down to 3 or 4 at one point. And it can happen so quickly when you start with a small population. We're excited to say, and I'm not sure if any of those council members are on, or even I guess outgoing Chief Spencer, they are now at 20 staff members, and we have seen a slowdown in some of the incidents that they were seeing before. So, Representative Pierce, I'm gonna come back to you, and something you mentioned. We've been talking about these resources, so we really want to stay there for a little bit. Rural counties often have fewer resources, but big geographic areas to cover. So, what state steps can the legislature take to better equip rural communities with the tools and the support they need to improve public safety? And I believe you signed on to a letter from Representative Rodney Pierce, another Pierce, about what should be done for rural places on around public safety.
Yes, I remember that. Thank you. I just think the conversation, and one thing about it, I know you do everything you can to work in a bipartisan way, and I appreciate that. But we have other legislators in those other areas where those same challenges are, and we need them to come on board and have the same conversation that we're having because it affects everybody. So I think this was it's going to be a bipartisan approach, no doubt about that. And there's a lot of there's more. I'm not going to say there's more rural in North Carolina. I might be right, but I just think we just need to really have that conversation and to remind all of our colleagues that they are facing the same challenges that whether they be a Democratic county or Republican county. I think that's going to be important. But I just think that we need to just file legislation because there's opportunities for that type of legislation to fund those police departments, as you said, and those sheriff offices and any other group who really wants to do anything in this area. But you really need law enforcement to be the driving force behind these the conversation that we're having tonight. Nonprofits can do what they do, but I still think you need the law enforcement to be the driving force. So I think we need to make sure they're properly funded and do all we can to make sure they have the resources that they need. But it's got to be a bipartisan approach across North Carolina.
Yeah, thank you. And your crime doesn't have a political party.
No, ma'am, not at
There's
all.
no R, D, or independent
No.
behind crime. And DA Merriweather, I think I've heard you talk a lot about the need for more staffing. And I think we've kind of gotten to that space where, our North Carolina justice system often, y'all often face limited staffing, which impacts long response times and fewer treatment or support services. How do those constraints affect your ability to address violence? And are there any partnerships or solutions that are helping to close these gaps, or you would even suggest that would help to close the gap?
Well, I think that as far as our justice system is concerned and our law enforcement structures, they need to be expanded by leaps and bounds, and that's from urban and rural areas alike. I got more district attorneys in my office than any other place in the state, and yet it's about half as many when we start considering ourselves with other large jurisdictions across the country. And so that's just something that we know. Right now, for homicide cases in my district, in order for those to get to trial, it's going to take 5 years. I know that also to be true in Miss Richardson's office as well. So whether it's urban or rural, we're both facing those challenges. In the meantime, what everybody needs when crime is happening in their community is a certain immediacy to the response of it, and that's something that we don't have. That's not just true in what happens in the courthouse. That's also true in what happens on the street and what happens in our neighborhoods and in our communities. And so, what I have seen work and what I have seen be successful is when you're drawing different people and different institutions together to try to attack a problem as soon as it happens and not waiting on a court system and actually fix it. So often in my community, that might be a hospital system. That might mean your local school. Quite frankly, it is works immensely better when we're talking about a community institution like a church, or like I've even seen Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts actually being a part of some community solutions and jumping on a problem. So you don't have to have, it's not necessarily about dollars and cents. It's about having an active and engaged community pulling together and being willing to jump on a problem. The more that we see that, that can be sort of a salve for communities that continue to suffer through acts of violence.
All right, thank you so much. And we'll talk probably towards our closing about how the community and how that can definitely help impact and find a solution and be a part of it and not just hopefully, unfortunately victims of it. Um, Assistant DA Richardson, kind of the same question for you. Um, you know, what are some of your thoughts about your experience on the resource issues and, are there any partnerships or solutions that you've seen to help close the gap or you would recommend that maybe people aren't implementing today?
Sure. Yes, first of all, I'd like to say that I know we're talking about violence in our community. I'd like to say, and I don't know if this is condoned by my boss, but by the time we have violent offenders, it's a little too late, right? By the time they get to us, it's too late. My mom's an educator, and she had to take child psychology classes, and she'll tell you there are many child psychologists, well known, that'll say by the time a kid gets to third grade, they've already been impacted enough to be able to you're able to kind of project whether or not they'll be a college graduate, whether they'll be in the criminal justice system, whether they'll actually graduate from high school. So our main focus needs to be not what's happening in the DA's office. We're on the back end. We're on the end where all of the impressionable years have already happened, all the, for lack of better words to use, damage has been done. We need to look on the front end. And so that was really where the community gets involved, right? If we can do things that prevent people from getting to that point, right? Because even DAs will, I'm sure Spencer wouldn't want to say this, but it's true. DAs often, when there are violent offenders, it's very difficult for them to say, well, let's put them in this program and not prosecute them. Because at that point, you have victims who are hurt. You have sometimes have families, if it's of course, a murder, families that are very upset. You have people who, after you've gotten injured from a violent offense, it's hard to discuss with a victim, hey, let's try this soft approach, right? Because the soft approach wasn't done with them when the offender committed the act. And so it's best if we can kind of divert our attention to what happens before a person becomes a violent offender. So what kind of diversion programs do we have, whether that's in the DA's office, with law enforcement, or in our school system, in our community? I know we have a law enforcement assisted diversion program here in Robson County. We've had it for a few years now with the sheriff's office. It kind of turned into a version of the LEAD program, and it's going back to the original version of the LEAD program soon. We have teen courts that kind of show kids what have let them have consequences and experience the court setting without it affecting their criminal record. Also helps them give them some kind of autonomy in choosing what kind of choices they have for their life, as well as other teens involved in the court. We have teen driving classes. I'm personally involved in our public schools, Robson County. We had a care council where we brought in parents of kids that were what the parents were about to get charged for is truancy violations. And we just met with them. It was me, members from the school board, principals, social workers, um, people from housing, the housing departments here, just kind of talk with the parents, say, hey, this is kind of your last chance, but we really want to understand why this kid's not coming to school, right? And we come up with a plan and we give them like 90 days or so to see if that plan works. Sometimes it's whether the kid lives in the district, because that happens. Sometimes it's about bedtime issues, how to handle those things that the average parent may say, oh, that's easy to fix. But or they may say it's common sense, but like my mama says, common sense ain't so common. And so just sitting down with these people and really talking with them kind of gets the kid back in school and keeps the parent from having a criminal charge. Again, that keeps that kid in school, and hopefully we won't see them 20 years down the road. We have to have our treatment courts, right? So our treatment courts here, we have people who have had multiple DWIs, people who are breaking, entering, doing larcenies, nothing that's actually physically injuring someone, but can easily snowball into something bigger. And so if we can stop it on the earlier end, then hopefully we can affect crime down the road. But that just takes time. You also have to have education programs. We have a Fresh Start program for first-time offenders, right? So people get little petty things, but they're young and they haven't been to school. So let's get them into our certificate program with Robson Community College. Let's see if UNCP will help them get into some kind of programs. And so again, it really is about starting a little bit further down or earlier in the timeline than waiting until there's a violent offense and seeing what we can do on the back end, right? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
No, that's awesome. And I see we've got a hand raised. And one of the things that you said that was important to New Rural Project when we were setting up our working groups, was to make sure that we looked at the whole cycle of folks in Wadesboro. So I 100% agree that we've got to do things for young people, right? So that they don't end up in these situations. But we also have parents who may be young themselves. And so one of the important working groups that we started was a parental working group. So, like you talked about, how do maybe there's education that parents need, maybe there are resources at school that the parents don't know about. And so that's where we also make sure that that part of the family and that of this issue is also a part of the solution. All right, Miss McNeil, I see your hand raised. I know we have one question in the comment. We'll go over to Miss McNeil since she has her hand raised, and then we'll address a question we got in the chat. Um, Ms. Carter, maybe you can unmute Ms. McNeil since she's raised her hand. Thank you. Ms. McNeil from Scotland County.
Thank you. I apologize. Good conversation. I actually am sitting here and I reflected back 30 years thanks to Miss Richardson. And Miss Richardson, the reason why I want to let you know this is because I think it would be unfair not to. I'm not related. I don't know if you're related to Judge Richardson,
Yeah, that's my
but
that's my
Judge
dad.
Richardson, oh my God. I feel like I'm sitting in the audience of someone who had the impact that MLK had on the lives of all of us.
Oh,
Judge
thank you. That's very
Richardson
sweet.
actually, you really need to know this. Judge Richardson actually, we fought for him to be our first African American judge in
Hmm.
Scotland County. There was a
Yeah.
fight to get him in that position.
Hmm.
And the other part of that is what Judge Richardson gave back to our county.
Hmm.
There was never a time that those organizations and entities that went out there and asked him to come speak with our kids, that he did not show up. On various occasions, I was on the phone with him in the evenings and he would talk to a young person.
Oh,
I want
yeah.
you to know the power of what your daddy brought to the table. And it does connect to this evening message. The preventiveness was always there for him. He
Oh,
would
yeah.
share with us the things that he did at home with you all, with having a chart or a school in the home. And
Hmm.
I'm saying this from the heart that there are very few people that walk in the plight of your dad. Not to knock or tear down anyone, but there was never a moment that he didn't have an hour or a second for others of different backgrounds. So I want to make sure you give your daddy a hug, a big hug for me, and just know that we will never forget. As soon as I heard your name, I was like, oh my God, this is a blessing. Let me connect that now to what you were saying.
Sure.
And the big piece that we have to understand is we got to stop being in the back of a situation. And I think this is a part, Miss Wallace, of what you're doing, trying to get in front of, trying to connect the dots. Somehow, we've got to formulate ideas and keep in mind that there's several entities out there that are doing things with our young people and our families, but let's be a part of them. And and you all know, sitting in the chairs, that the NAACP has been out there for more than 100 years. We have our youth entities, but not only that, you spoke of teen court, but we have other entities out there. One being the American Legion Oratorical, which does bring us to understanding the young people what this country is founded on and what we had to fight to bring it to the realization of. And I'm going to slow it down because I really should have a question, but I am thankful, Pastor Pierce, that you're on here with Judge Richardson's daughter, because there is no stronger strength on here that I have never known a person that walked with him. And not only in our courtroom was he respected, but he was also respected in Robeson County. So the work has been done strongly with people of that nature. And if each of you all would take up that similar banner to remember that every child, nobody knocked on their mother's womb and said, I want to be born poor, nor do I want to be born in a violent environment. Each of them have the potential to change. And I'm sorry, because I guess I really just wanted to make sure you knew that and understood it. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Miss McNeil. I'll definitely share those words with him. Like I always tell people, I think I raised him right. So,
And I know Miss McNeil as well. I know she was a little humble. Has been a fighter for young people and leading the NAACP's youth area across the state of North Carolina, and now is a school board member. So continue to reach out to children. So we appreciate you. There was a comment earlier on that said that many times the fish fries and stop the violence events are not reaching those who we need to reach. How can we best reach those that would most benefit? So that's the question. And I will just throw in, when we did have our community fish fry, we try to do our events as much as possible, kind of on Main Street, so that the average person walking by can actually participate. And when we had ours, one of the things we were really impacted by is a gentleman who attended our barbershop conversation, which New World Project does, back in 2022. And we lost touch of him over the years. 3 years we hadn't seen him. No phone number was disconnected, and he came and enjoyed that dinner. And he was excited to see us again, and we could tell he was excited to see the community being serviced that way. So hopefully it won't be 3 years before we see him again, but I do know some of those folks who were impacted can be reached. And a young lady was afraid to even complete our survey because she lived across the street. And so I completed the survey for her and said, you don't even have to give me your name. We have a gun violence or violence survey. And I said, I'll just put a random name and just, I want your answers because your voice needs to be in this space. So any other ideas about how like those community events can sometimes not reach the masses and it's still a bigger mass of people we would have loved to reach? So
Well,
Representative Merriweather. I mean, sorry,
yeah, I
I
was
call you
just
Representative DA.
that's all right. Like I told you earlier, I've been called worse, that's for sure. I I gotta say this though, those community events, you need to feed your army from time to time. That just by having those things which actually help to build community and build resources means that those folks are prepared to be able to respond as a unit to the problems that your community faces. I can tell you there's some communities where we don't have that in Mecklenburg County, and that community suffers for it. We have some communities that aren't doing so well economically, but they're those same 20 people that show up to those types of events are activated to be able to respond as a unit and to encircle the issues that they are facing with young people in particular. So even though the folks, your target audience isn't necessarily showing up to some of those things, that's true, but the community that is sustained as a result of those events That's impactful. And don't stop that, because that's what builds a community.
All right, anyone else want to respond to that question?
I would just briefly, I always like to say that often the people that need the most help are not the ones that want the most attention. But there are people in your neighborhoods, in your schools, who need that help. And so I think the easiest way or the fastest way to reach the people that need the most help are to go find those community leaders. And it may not be a community leader like Caroline Sumter, who's, all over Red Springs, but it could be that person, that grandma around the block who always gives a snack to this kid who lives across the street, right? It could be that school social worker who sees a kid that was really happy a couple months ago suddenly go into their shell. You need to find those people who are willing to be advocates, not necessarily advocates with a big, blowhorn, but can be an advocate for that one person. And once you start seeing that change, it's kind of like a domino effect. Once you start seeing that one person who starts coming to your community events or starts reaching out to those resources, they'll refer another. I always think about in our treatment courts, a lot of the people that get in our treatment courts are because their friend went through our treatment court, got treatment, got a job, got stable housing, and they're doing great. And that graduate from our program said, "Hey, you need to do this. This is how it worked out for me." And so word of mouth and that one-on-one connection, we also often call it in our treatment courts a warm handoff, is the easiest way to get someone involved in a bigger program or in something that's going to help them. The pamphlets, the flyers, that's great, but until someone can actually see what you're doing, it's just words on a piece of paper.
I I 100% agree. It's that the folks that they know, they're more likely to trust, right? And so maybe there's someone that came to that gentleman that came to that fish fry, went back across the street to his community that has a lot of violence and talked about our organization or the Holla Center or, Submissive Action and what's happening and some of the things that he learned at that event. So Representative Pierce, I'm gonna give this next one to you. It comes from Christina Davis, who is part of our one of our board members for New World Project and your constituent in Hoke County. Um, what you said was more recent legislative decisions have favored granting greater access to guns, absent of the checks and balances that controls who gets them and how they get in people's hands. How and what would, you or this panel, but you specifically, offer, how would you think this situation could be addressed by communities wanting to see this trend change?
Um, Start with your legislators, because I think all of you on the call understand that it's it's a legislative piece of action, as we well know, and we know the party that's pushing that, and until you can get their attention, I think, and I know most of the bills that have been passed, bills in charter schools where they can carry guns. So all of those type bills were pushed by uh, I just use I'm a Democrat, and I know you're partisan, try to be, but I know how you operate, Sister Wallace. Thank you for the way you try to work with everybody. But we all know on this call that the other party is pushing that type legislation, and until you get their attention, and the only way you get their attention is at the ballot box, and continue to advocate. Uh, and because I think that, ladies and gentlemen, as I go back to a point I made a few minutes ago, these things happen to everybody, as Ms. Wallace said, whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, it's everybody being affected by it. And until they really can come to that realization, and the folks that they represent understand that the laws that they are passing or failing to pass affects everybody. And I think I can just land my plane on that, Ms. Wallace. I think that's what it's going to take. And I'm just going to be honest on the call. And as I said, I've said it again, you work in a bipartisan way, and I understand that. But on this particular issue, I've got to really just tell it, as old folks say, tell it like it is. And so that's where we are with that. We've got to let them understand that it's affecting everybody, and we need to, because the thing is, I always have a problem with gun violence, ladies and gentlemen. My concern is that an innocent child And it troubles me every time I hear about it that an innocent child is going to be effective, hurt by some of this gun violence. And that's going to be so heartbreaking to all involved. But I just think legislators need to, as Ms. Davis, thank you for the question, they all need to be notified and put on notice that it's unacceptable, a lot of legislation they're allowing to vote to come out of Raleigh. I park right there, but I think that's what it's going to take.
All right, and you brought to some of the bread and butter New World Project, which is making sure folks know about elections happening.
Yes, ma'am.
And so right now we're in the middle of filing period. So it ends on December 19th, where people are filing from everything from U.S. Senate to North Carolina Supreme Court to North Carolina Court of Appeals to county commissioners to sheriffs, I think some school boards. And so one, if you feel like you can be that change, go ahead and file. You have 10 days. You might be able
And
to,
one thing, Ms. Wallace, see, all politics are local, and the
yes, sir.
local level elected officials need to have the same attitude of the folks they represent. State level is one. I get that, but local folks who we vote for need to have the same attitude or feel the same way because Mrs. Something, she stays in Red Springs. She's there. The way she knows what her people are dealing with, what they're going with, so she got to be an advocate at that level. And I think it's where it all starts. As we all know, all politics are local. So I think those local boards, whether they be Dems, Independent Republic, need to advocate the same thing that their folks are dealing with to the state level and even to the national level. Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Wallace.
No, no, that's awesome. And after that filing period, March, I believe it's March 3rd or 4th, my team can correct me, is our primary for our very important midterm elections. And I know a lot of folks see things on the news, you hear about Congress, but our General Assembly, as Representative Pierce and Board Member Christina Davis McCoy said, it's changing some of those state laws around guns. And
Yes.
every single one of those seats in the House and the Senate is up for re-election. And so you will have a chance, no matter where you live in North Carolina, you have a House or Senate race. Most of you have a county commission race, as he said, that local level. So we've got to vote those ballots up and down, and then election is in November. And obviously Congress is very important because a lot of these things federally impact us as it rolls down the hill. So I think we've got time. I see Mr. Clark has his hand raised. We'll take one last question.
I think he's on mute.
You're on mute, Ms. Clark. Just unmute yourself, please. Nope, you're still on mute. We can hear you now. Uh-oh, you went back on mute, sir.
Why is it doing this?
There you go.
Hello? So I'm grateful, very grateful that you put on this program, and I'm very grateful to all these esteemed people, these well-educated, these people holding these important positions that affect so many people's lives. But I'm so very disappointed to hear the same things over and over again, that we all understand what needs to be done, but why isn't it being done? Because we're not in a position of government to make it happen. We have a few positions, but we don't have enough working together to have the power to change things. Poverty is policy. So we have these poverty places because of government. We have these people shooting each other because of the laws that are in place that enable the guns to be in their hand and to be at the bottom of the barrel fighting like rats or crabs for a few scraps. So I want to echo what everyone's saying, that we all need to go down there. And if you're assistant DA, I need you to go down there and sign up for county commissioner or the low wages for a state representative or a state senator. And I myself have filed for Congress, and I intend to win. And if I do win District 8 Congress, Robeson County, part of Mecklenburg County, down to Lumberton, and get all of us to work together to solve these problems, because all of y'all said the solutions. We can fix them. We can fix them. We know the answers. We know how to do it, but we have to work together to make it happen. And so
All right.
I'm getting older now. I'm 72, but I'm going to run. And
Well, thank
so
you so much, Mr. Clark, for jumping in. And as I said, Fowlers goes to the 19th. So thank you for not just talking about it, but trying to be a part of it. And as we wrap, if we could do a rapid fire, we've been talking a lot about elected officials, but we also believe at New World Project, and I think everybody here believes that the power is also in our hands. Like we give some of the power to the elected officials, but we have power. So if you could just briefly say, what do you think outside of legislation that can be done with the faith community or schools or community? What would you recommend to many of us who are not in any elected official and position and may never be, but what can we in the community do? So I need you all to give me about 1 minute for each person so I can move it on to Ms. Sumter to close us out.
I'll go first. I think community projects and rural projects are doing really great things, but I think you often get discouraged if you don't see the results you need in a certain amount of time. But to affect people's lives, you need decades worth of time over many people's lives. And so I think the best thing to do is to keep going as long as you can. Keep doing that on the ground work, keep going to doing those barbecues, keep talking to those community members who knows everyone, and do it 30 years from now, still be doing it and keep up the same pace because we cannot change a whole community's problems within 12, 18 months. It's just not going to work. We might not even be able to do it in 12, 18 years, but you have to keep doing it until you actually do see the change. And don't get weary from it. It's hard work, right? And it's going to be very difficult and you're going to get a little bit hopeless along the way because you won't see the change you want to see. But if you keep sticking with it, it will happen.
Oh, thank you. That's so inspirational because I know my team probably feels a little weary sometimes, but as Mr. Gateway says, you put it in New World Project's hand. We haven't stopped yet, and we're only at the beginning of it, 6 months in. Um, DA Merriweather, and then we'll end with Representative Pierce.
Yeah, people don't get in the public safety work like they're selling ice cream. They know that they are getting a job which associates them with people's pain and people's tragedy. Which is also to say that we are used to bearing the brunt of people being upset. And we respond to that voice of conscience. So be loud. Always act like the lives in your community that are lost, the lives in your community that are affected by crime, act like it matters to you. Because people may not necessarily be responsive in exactly that moment, but if they keep hearing from you, they will respond. And so don't be frustrated by the fact that it seems like nothing else is getting done. I promise you, like water on a rock, the change will be made. So just keep at it.
All right. Representative Pierce, just bring us home. No pressure.
I was just thinking here, particularly all these ladies on the call, I think you need the Fatty Lou Hamer position, sick and tired of being sick and tired. I think that's the way she said it. Am I correct on that? So I just think, I'm looking at this issue that you're talking about tonight. In Raleigh, we have the late women against gun violence. I think we need more women to be men too, of course, but women just have that mothering type attitude, and I think people will they listen to men too. But I think I commend you, ladies, on the call tonight. I commend you for being on the call and all that you do. But I think we need more groups like that in our neighborhoods to find those mothers who've been affected by crime and who have sons and daughters and who really want to see something different in their life. So I think we need to, Mrs. Wallace, to organize more. And you do a good job with that. But it's just still a pocket of women that I think have the voice and would be glad to have the voice if they're given the opportunity to do it in most of our communities. So I hope that, in fact, I can do to help you in Scotland County. But going back to another issue, I think our churches, we do a good job of praising the Lord and all that we do. But I think every moment on Sunday mornings, there ought to be something. Uh, all ministers ought to take just a few minutes to talk about what's going on, not to be negative about it, but in a positive way, talk about what more the church can do to help our communities. And I think the NACP and the church, they don't have a divorce. They still ought to work together. And in most counties, they do work together. But I think as a pastor of 45 years, I'm going to take opportunities every now and then to talk about the issues that affect our lives daily, because some of the folks who are sitting in those pews are hurting folks. I've buried many young men who have been uh, killed by violence, so I know the hurt, and I don't care what you say. Nothing eases that pain. So I just think the church needs to play a greater role going forward in the conversation in the community with violence and whatever's going on that affect people. Thank you for allowing me to share that.
All right. Well, thank you so much. If you all can join me in giving either a physical or a virtual round of applause to Representative Garland Pierce, DA Merriweather, and Assistant DA Richardson for this engaging conversation, and Mr. LaJohnny Leak for putting the heart into all that we've been talking about. So I'm going to throw it over to our Policy and Program Director, Ms. Caroline Sumter, to close us out.
I'm mute.
Can you hear me now? All right. So we just want to, again, thank you, Cynthia, for moderating this section. Thank you again to our esteemed panelists and then those of you that are hanging out with us tonight for this urgent conversation. We have some great takeaways that we can share and do with just a few moments a day. Again, our call to action tonight: continue to provide feedback to your DA's office, whether that's attending public listening sessions, participating in advisory committees, voicing concerns about how cases are handled, trends, sharing trends or community needs. This helps the prosecutors improve transparency and justice. If there is a county or town violence prevention program, join that program. It may include mentorships. We heard about teen court, other courts that take place, youth programs, after school activities, and community centers. We all know that they reduce long-term violence. Again, promoting responsible firearm safety, encouraging the gun lock distribution. Representative Pierce and two of his town halls had Department of Public Safety, and they distributed gun locks, and those are available at your local juvenile justice departments or members of the Department of Public Safety. Safe storage locks, workshops that talks about reducing illegal gun sources directly supports public safety efforts. And DA Merriweather spoke of that. The guns left in vehicles that people can gain access to. So let's be responsible with our firearms. And then supporting victims and their families. When communities rally around victims of crime, it encourages the healing and it builds trust with legal institutions. Call elected officials and demand they support community safe policies. And our panelists hit on those points as well. Let them know what you want them to do. In essence, I'm an elected official, so we work for you. That's what we say. Attend legislative days to advocate for public safety and resources for our courts and law enforcement at the General Assembly. And also, our last upcoming NRP public event will be our Curls and Fade Holiday Social. This is like a family reunion for our barbershop and beauty salon conversations. It is free to attend, but registration closes tonight at 11:59 p.m. So scan this QR code or you may find this event on Mobilize. It will take place again this Sunday, December 14th from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. at 982 in Hamlet, North Carolina. Again, if you are not following us and you want to know how you can, our social media platforms are such. Follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, or join us on our New Rural Project YouTube channel. You can also visit us on the web by viewing www.newruralproject.org. Donating to NRP. No donation is too small, no donation is too big to continue to help us do this work in your communities. You may scan this QR code. We also have the link that will be dropped in the chat. I also want to give a great shout out to the NRP staff and team members. We are few in number, but mighty in force. So a special thanks to the team for allowing, working with this program and to ensure its success. So thank you, Nisi, Miriam, Elle, Kia, Jarvis, Eric, and Maryjane.
And Caroline, I want to just jump in. I think we have a couple of our Neuro Project board members that are on. I know we don't have them on a page, but I'd like to give a shout out to our board chair, Mr. Jamie Hildreth, and I have referenced Miss Christina Davis McCoy, who are also on the New Rural Project board. And if there's anybody I missed, sorry about that, but definitely a part of the team making this work happen.
Thank you, board. Again, a special thanks to our panelists for their participation. Thank you so much for sharing your insight, your wisdom, and your time with us on this critical conversation. We know this will only be the first of many. So that's my way to saying, watch out. I'll be sending you an email. If you have any burning questions, is there something that we can do within your communities? Please feel free to reach out to Cynthia Wallace, our Executive Director, at her email. You can contact me as well as Nisi, our Organizing Director. And on behalf of NRP Board of Directors, staff, super volunteers, and you, our NRP family, we want to say thank you for tuning in tonight for our urgent conversation focusing on public safety. Have a happy holidays, and we will see you in 2026. Thank you.